Hello, hello everyone. Bonsoir tout le monde. Soyez les bienvenus au Cloudness Standing JDJ Cloud Abidjan. Pour ceux qui ne connaissent pas l'événement, c'est un événement qu'on a organisé dès la première année où le JDJ Cloud Abidjan a été créé. Donc, du coup, c'est pas un truc qui est nouveau. C'est vrai, ça fait un moment qu'on ne l'a pas fait depuis qu'on a créé le JDJ Cloud Abidjan et qu'on l'a fait une fois. Après, on n'a pas suivi. Pour ceux qui étaient avec nous depuis le début, donc du coup, vous savez un peu quel type d'activité on fait. Donc, du coup, ça fait partie des activités qu'on fait. Donc, ce qu'on essaie juste de faire, c'est juste de voir un peu ce qui a été fait au niveau du Cloudness. Donc, du coup, on essaie juste de permettre à nos participants d'avoir une meilleure connaissance de tout ce qui a été fait au Cloudness. Donc, du coup, on amène des speakers pour aller plus en profondeur, genre pour leur donner plus de détails sur les technologies qui ont été présentées au Cloudness pour qu'ils aient plus de connaissances de ces technologies-là. Donc, c'est plus des trucs qui sont beaucoup plus orientés pratiques pour ceux qui sont vraiment intéressés. So, I can just speak. So I will move to English. So this event is not the first event, Cloudness in GDG Cloud Abidjan. So the first time when we create the GDG Cloud Abidjan, so we organize the Cloudness extending, and so the people who participate in GDG Cloud Abidjan event since we start, so know what is Cloudness extending. So it's just the Cloudness, and we just extend Cloudness to permit to give opportunity to the member of GDG Cloud community who to know more how about the technology Google engineer present in Cloudness. So this goal of this event, and I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to present speaker. So the speaker we have today is Patrick. So Patrick is GD. So Patrick, I give you the place, and let's go.
Thank you very much. Yes. Well, thanks for having me. Yes, Patrick Haggerty. I live in the southeastern United States. Down here.
Okay.
The weather's actually very similar to the Ivory Coast, believe it or not. We get about the same amount of rain. This is one of the wettest parts of the United States, so it's very wet, very humid here where I live. So anyway, yeah, I was lucky. I actually got to go to Next a few weeks ago. My company sent me, so that was kind of nice. If you'd like to find me on LinkedIn, that right there is my QR code for LinkedIn. I will also give you my contact information a little later on at the end. Also, the slide deck I'm using, if you'd like a copy of the slide deck I'm using, you can grab it from that URL right there. I can chat, right? Maybe not. So you can either grab it from that tiny URL, agent 0505, or you can use that QR code to get a copy of the slide deck. Agents, of course, are very hot right now. Generative AI in general is very hot right now. I do training for Google. The company I work for is Google's largest training partner. We do lots of training for Google, teaching companies how to use Google Cloud, etc. That's why I was lucky enough to get to go out to see Google Next in Las Vegas. I did some presentations out there, and it was a lot of fun. It was April of 2023 when I got a call from Google asking if I would be interested in writing a class on generative AI. And April of 2023, in some ways, seems like it wasn't that very long ago. But in April of 2023, I said I didn't know much about generative AI, which was true. I had played with it a little bit, but I hadn't done very much. From April 2023 till now, so the last 2 years, I've done a lot. I've done a lot of stuff with generative AI. I've worked extensively with Google's technologies. I've also worked with OpenAI. I've worked with Claude. I've worked with some of the other generative AI technologies out there. Anyway, the idea of an agent, the agent basically is designed to handle sort of a unit of work, I guess you could say. If you call a bank on the phone, or if you chat a bank and you say, I have a problem, the bank might ask you, well, what kind of problem do you have? Well, I have a tech support problem with the website. Okay, let me transfer you to the tech support agent. That would be kind of a different person maybe than I have a problem with one of my bank accounts. Okay, let me transfer you to account services. So an agent sort of represents a unit of work. If I just want to use Gemini, if I'm in Google Cloud and I'm in, Vertex AI, I have this entire section of Vertex AI now, starting with Vertex AI Studio. And now you see there's a new section that's shown up maybe a month ago, which is this kind of agent builder section down here. This entire section of Vertex AI is really for nothing but working with generative AI. If I want to use Gemini directly, I can come over here into the Vertex AI ADI Studio, and it will show me what the code would look like if I want to use Gemini directly with Python or JavaScript or whatever else. So, it kind of starts with, I want to talk to Gemini. But if I'm talking to Gemini, it's very much like I'm on the Gemini web page, right? I can ask it questions, it can give me answers, but how do I get it doing what I want it to do? If I wanted to handle tech support questions for a bank website, how can I get it handling tech support questions? If I go to Gemini right here and I say, how do I open a new bank on my bank homepage? Gemini will say something like, go to the homepage and find the new account button. But Gemini's kind of guessing. It doesn't know for sure on this particular website, right? The only time I was in Africa, I worked for Zenith Bank for, I guess, 3 months in Lagos, Nigeria. So that I was in Lagos working for a few months for a big bank. So if I'm working for Zenith Bank, I want to know, how exactly do you create an account on this exact website, right? So what Gemini has an API, it'll let me talk to it directly, but I want to handle a more complex task. Okay, so agents sort of take the low level, I want to talk to a generative model like Gemini, and they add sort of a wrapper around, how do I handle a particular task, right? If I want to build agents in Google Cloud, I have two main approaches I can take. The approach I'm not talking about in this class is the more manual approach, right? This is where maybe I'm using LangChain. This is where maybe I'm using LangGraph. That's kind of a traditional way I would have taken. When I was at Next in Vegas, they announced that new agent development kit. The agent development kit's kind of interesting. As a matter of fact, I just found, the agent development kit actually has now a website of sample code. This ADK samples up on the Google GitHub, where you can see some examples of how would you use the agent development kit to build agents, which is kind of interesting. So that's a new API that's a new framework that Google brought out at Next, and it would be in direct competition with something like LangChain, LangGraph. We have agent to agent, we have the new RAG engine in Google Cloud, and then there's a whole bunch of core services. And I guess RAG engine probably belongs down here with the core services. We have a vector database, vector search. We have the Gemini models, we have BigQuery, we have Colab, we have a lot of different pieces in Google Cloud that can help us build it manually. The good thing about building it manually is you have full control over every aspect of the way the agent works. Okay, that would be the best thing of the manual approach. The worst thing about the manual approach is you have full control and responsibility over putting everything together, right? You have to do a lot of manual work to kind of glue all the pieces together. The manual approach is great when I need the flexibility. If I want to change how the documents are being chunked into my database, I want to change how they're being embedded, or I want to change what vector search algorithm I'm using, or what vector database I'm using, or anything like that. In the manual approach, you can do it all. Google, though, has brought out a more automated approach, which they now call AI applications. Before, Google Next a few weeks ago, before Google Next a few weeks ago, they called it Agent Builder. At Google Next, they renamed a whole bunch of stuff in the AI area of Google Cloud, right? So it used to be called Agent Builder. They've reworked it, so it's now called AI Applications. If I'm in Google Cloud and I go to search for AI applications, now this is not confusing at all, right? They have this little section in here in Vertex now called Agent Builder, but that's not where AI applications is, at least not yet. If I go search for AI applications though, or if you go search for Agent Builder, it will find the AI applications kind of part of Google Cloud over here. This is a more Google-driven way of building an agent. The good thing about it is you can build a really powerful agent in a very short amount of time. The bad thing about it is you don't have a lot of manual control over how it's putting the agent together. Now, let's face it, Google literally invented generative AI. They do a pretty good job. They know how this stuff works. So they are sort of putting things together a best practice kind of way. And you take what you get, right? If you wanted something where you were a little bit more involved, that's why they're giving you some of the core services, right? One of the big new core services, of course, is RAG Engine. When you talk about AI applications, almost always you're talking about a RAG-grounded agent, okay? A RAG-grounded generative AI application, okay? In Agent Builder, I don't have a lot of control over how the retrieval augmented generation is actually done. If I wanted to be involved, again, RAG Engine gives me more kind of direct input over how it works. But again, what I kind of want to talk about today is I want to talk a little bit about these AI applications that Google can help me build, right? It's a wizard. I'm pulling out the magic wand from Google Cloud, and it's going to help me build an AI application. It's fast. It uses Gemini. I can ground it in my data. One of the biggest challenges of a generative technology like Gemini is how do I get it doing what I want it to do? Okay. If I have a bank website and I have a chatbot that's driven by Gemini, how do I make sure that Gemini is answering only banking questions? If someone comes in and says, tell me about Charles Dickens, I have to write a one-page paper on Charles Dickens. My bank chatbot should not answer that question, right? Because that is not on point. That is prompt hijacking. I'm trying to get my generative agent to do something it's not supposed to do, right? That means I need to kind of focus it. I need to give it something like documents or a data set of some sort, or maybe an API or something, so we can provide, kind of these enterprise specific answers. It should be answering questions on whatever I want to answer questions on, right? Car sales or tech support or anything else. Okay. I want to be able to easily integrate this into my other applications I might be constructing in Google Cloud, enterprise ready, collaborative development. Yeah. Okay. When I go into AI applications and I go to create a new application, it will prompt me for different types of applications now. Okay. This is very much a work in progress. Google is evolving this stuff right now. Every time I come in here, I'm not surprised when I see new stuff or different stuff or et cetera. Okay. The first major type of applications you can build is search-oriented applications, right? Custom search. Custom search, imagine a search box on your web page, but the search box maybe searched a bunch of tech support PDFs, right? That would be custom search. Search for your website. That's literally what it sounds like. I want to build a generative AI web search for my website, okay? Media search. I'm searching images or videos, healthcare files, search for commerce. Me and another guy are about to write a class for Google on Vertex AI search for retail was the last name, right? And they've just renamed it search for commerce. This is your storefront and you're selling things on your website. And based on what this user has bought in the past and based on what they've looked at today, how are we going to, when they search for something, how are we going to return the search results that are something they're most likely to buy, right? And then, of course, something new that Google has just brought out that's still in preview is this new agent space concept. Agent space is related to another Google technology called Notebook LM. Agent space is all about building like a digital assistant agent. Okay. In agent space, I can connect it to stuff like your calendar, your Google Drive, I don't know, Salesforce. I can connect it to a bunch of different technologies, and it's sort of like you're building a digital assistant is sort of what that's doing. Our next major type of agents that we can build with AI applications is conversational agents. Okay. Now, conversational agents, you have kind of two versions. This still says Dialogflow. Dialogflow as a product has been renamed, right? That's the old name. Hey, Google, what's the low temperature tonight?
In Moss Point tonight, expect a low of 61 degrees.
Okay, so the technology that drives my little Google Assistant right there is fundamentally Dialogflow, right? Dialogflow is Google's last generation way of doing what we would now call a conversational agent, right? So the new terminology is Dialogflow as a name is gone. They're calling both of these things really conversational agents, right? So these are both conversational agents, but there's two types. There are playbook-based agents. There are playbook-based agents, which is what I'm going to build in a minute. And there are flow-based agents. Flow-based agents is the last generation technology. It's based on natural language processing mostly. Okay. In flow-based, just like my Google Assistant here, someone has to kind of script. If someone asks about the weather, and these are different versions of the weather, this is sort of the way you answer it, right? So it was really based on natural language processing instead of generative AI. Playbook-based agents is sort of the new approach. As we go to the future, Dialogflow, if you still use flow-based agents, that's fine, but that's kind of the legacy technology. The newer agents are going to be playbook. They're going to be generative, right? So these are this is fundamentally based on like natural language processing, where this is fundamentally based on generative AI. Okay. We also kind of have recommendation engines here. So again, recommendation engine recommend similar things on a website, or recommend media, or recommend retail applications. And again, that recommendations for retail is sort of related to some of that search for commerce stuff out there. Okay. Now, when you're building AI applications, typically they're always going to be grounded in some source of truth. You have some sort of information that is your official information. It might be a big table in BigQuery. It might be a big folder full of PDF files or Word documents or something like that. Okay? It's some sort of source data. The most common way of building grounded applications is you use retrieval augmented generation. I can remember being in grade school and my teacher told me, you need to write a paper on the moon. You must have 3 sources. And I would go out there and I would find like a book and a couple of websites. And that's my source of truth, if you will. And I'm the reasoning engine. I'm writing the paper on the moon. Okay. But I'm using the data I found. That's exactly what retrieval augmented generation is, right? I search for information on the moon, I retrieve it, and I use it to augment my generated information, right? That's kind of what it is. If you look at RAG, if you look at retrieval augmented generation, part of this is you give it your source of truth. In a minute, I'm going to do this, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a folder full of PDF files. So I'm going to hand it a bunch of PDF files. It's going to pull those PDF files into some sort of, how do we parse it? How do we transform it into meaningful chunks? How do we store it somewhere where we can search it later on, right? In Google Cloud, this stuff right here is vector search. Vector search is a vector search and vector storage database. So I'm storing my indexed vectors, if you will, there, and I'm linking them back to, say, some document where the information is. Oh, you want to write a paper on the moon? Go look at this PDF file over here, and on 39, they're talking about the moon or something. That's kind of what vector search is doing. When I come in and I ask a question in a RAG-based system, part of the part of the process is they're asking a question about the moon. Let's go search our database up here. Do we have any information on the moon? Well, yeah, here's 4 documents on the moon. In this document, it's on page 29, and this document is on page 200, whatever. It hands those pages over. It ranks them. It sorts them. What's the best resource? What's the second best resource? And then finally, it uses that to generate the answer, right? This picture, by the way, I pulled right out of the RAG engine documentation. So if you are using RAG engine, which we are not, if you're using RAG engine, you have more direct control over each of these steps. If you're using AI applications, it pretty much automates all this for you, right? Okay. Now, where could my data come from? Well, again, I'm over here. If I'm in AI applications and I go to data stores and I want to create a data store, it will ask me, where should I pull the information? And you'll see places like, it could be your website. If you're pulling information off your website and you want to take full advantage of the generative crawl of your website, in other words, you want Gemini to read your website and help build an index for you, if you will, then you have to prove ownership of the website. You have to be able to add a TXT record to the DNS records for that website, right? Maybe you're pulling the data out of BigQuery. So maybe I have some columns in BigQuery, and one column is a big text column, but the other columns are title and URL and image and stuff. Maybe I have a bunch of PDF files or Word documents or whatever in cloud storage. Maybe I'm going to connect this to some information about people, healthcare API, announcements, general purpose API calls. Notice our relational databases, Cloud SQL, Spanner, Bigtable, or AlloyDB, some non-relational databases like Bigtable, Firestore. Notebook LM is another new one that's coming out. Notebook LM, remember, is sort of an end user product to help you build sort of a assistant agent. And it's in the agent space, part of Google Cloud now, right? Anyway, so these are all sources. You do need to be careful. Not all these sources are available for every application type, not currently. At some point, I'm sure it will be. I'm sure all the sources will work with any app type, but that's not true right now. Always build your app first. And as you build your app, then build your data source, because it will prompt you for whatever is supported for that by that application type. So watch out for that. Yeah. We also have some workspace sources, Google Drive, People Search, et cetera, et cetera. The agent space applications, I think they have something like 300 different connectors in that one, right? So besides these kind of sources, Agent Space also has a whole bunch of connectors that they bought, that they are building to help you connect to, all kinds of other external applications, Salesforce and Workday and all kinds of different apps that might contain data, Jira, etc. So you should expect to see more connectors to allow you to ground in more sorts of sources of information. Okay, so what I'm going to build is I'm going to build an agent that can answer cooking questions. Okay, I'm going to use this sort of data here, this source of data. That source of data is a bunch of cookbooks I found. So I went to the Gutenberg project and I found a bunch of old cookbooks, and I decided I wanted to build an agent that can help me cook, right? That's what I wanted. Okay, now that full source there is about 70 books. That's about 70 books. 70 books takes a while to go through. I pulled my 70 books in last night so it would be ready for today's event. It took about 30 minutes to pull the books in. And pulling those 70 books in cost me about $170, right? So one thing you have to understand about Agent Space is really pretty cool. It does a lot of amazing stuff, but Google is definitely going to charge you if you're using Agent Space. Now, granted, that's probably 15 to 20,000 pages of books, right? So there's a lot of information in there. So it cost me about $170 to, read 15 or 20,000 pages. If you want to do this yourself, I picked out one book it's a book on making sandwiches. So if you wanted to play with this on your own, you might just point to that cookbook where, it's a sandwich book, and it probably would take, $1 or $2 for it to read that cookbook. But anyway, so just keep that in mind if you're playing with this tool on your own. Also, if you're thinking about using this tool on your own application, you need to go look at the pricing and how the pricing on this tool works. Okay, so I'm over here in AI applications, and I'm going to build a new application. I'm going to build a new application. What kind of application? I want to build a conversational agent. When you hear the term agent or assistant or agentism or anything like that, this is the type of agent that they're most likely talking about, right? This is the newest kind of way of approaching building generative applications. Okay, so I come out here and I create a generative agent. First time you ever do this, it's going to make you turn on the Dialogflow API. You have to have your Vertex APIs on. You have to have your Dialogflow API on. Since Dialogflow as a product is going away, I don't know what they're going to rename the product. But they, as far as I know, have not renamed the product yet. I'm going to build my own agent. You'll notice, you see where it says use pre-built agent. If you want to experiment with an agent that Google has already built, they have some interesting ones you can experiment with, right? So I'm going to build my own agent. This is my cooking advice agent. I'm going to run it out of Central US since that's where I am. I'm going to run it off my time zone, which is right there. I'm going to run it in English. This goes back to what I was talking about before, right? Really, both of these kind of sort of go to the same place, right? If you create a conversational agent the way I did, it's a playbook agent. If you create a chat agent, it's a flow agent. And you notice down here, this is really asking me the same thing. Do I want to use the older sort of Dialogflow approach, the flow-based approach? Flow-based approach is sort of a decision tree. If the user asks about the weather, then these are some possible weather-related questions we can handle. Natural language, remember, is pretty good at kind of understanding the basics of what a question or a sentence means. But it doesn't have some of the generative capabilities and advanced, shall we say, reasoning capabilities of something like Gemini, right? So flow-based, a flow is more like a decision tree, okay? Playbook-based, it's more like you've hired your agent, and this new person comes in and you're telling them how to handle a task, right? So I'm going to do a playbook-based agent. A playbook-based agent. And it builds my core of my agent. Okay, now, I'm going to pull up the agent I started to build yesterday because it's already indexed the data, right? So I'm going to pull up the agent I started to build yesterday. This is where we were just looking a second ago with the new agent. Okay. Generative agents are exactly that. They are generative. Generative technology is really good at reading and understanding, right? That's it. It can read, it can watch video, it can listen to music, and it can understand basically what it's reading. When I'm dealing with a generative agent, I'm a developer by trade. I wrote my first line of code in 1980. I got paid to write my first line of code in 1993, Perl. In 1996, I started writing Java code, C#, Python, C++. I've written a bunch of languages as I go. My brain is very developer focused. One of the things that was very confusing to me about agents is, how do I tell an agent when to make a decision? Because, of course, I'm thinking I need to write an if statement. No. Agents are kind of reasoning. It's more like you've just hired a new person. If I hire a new person, I worked tech support for like 3 months one time. I remember when I got hired in tech support, they brought me in, they told me what I was going to do, and they paired me up with an experienced tech support rep. And I would listen to them answer phone calls all day long, and I would learn how to handle things, right? Well, that's kind of this. It's like you've just hired this new person, and you're now supposed to tell them what they're supposed to do, right? What I need to do is I need to give them a goal. I need to give them instructions on how to handle their task. I also can actually include code if I want to use a more programmatic approach, or if I actually want to say, if this happens, you should handle it this way. I can do that. I can also link it into tools. Okay. Agents are broken into playbooks. A playbook is very much like a user story in software development. If I have an agent that's designed to handle sales, well, maybe I have one playbook which is for actually handling the shopping process. Let me tell you about products. Let me tell you about options, and we can have a conversation on that. That might be one playbook. Then I might have another playbook where I'm walking the person through making their purchase, right? So if you imagine kind of in software development, when you're thinking in terms of like user stories, major uses of your systems, that's kind of what playbooks do for agents, right? It's a major like subsection of tasks. What's the goal of this playbook? What are the instructions on how it does this playbook? Okay, so I came in here, I created my conversational agent. I selected the playbook type like I was telling you guys. And again, now I'm thinking about this playbook, right? How is this playbook going to do its thing? Now, usually when I start doing things like I want the playbook to have a goal, what I usually do is I go over to Gemini and I get Gemini to help me write my playbook, right? And I actually did this yesterday to get ready for this class. Okay, I came over here and I told Gemini, hey, Gemini, you know, I am now creating a GCP conversational agent. It will have a single playbook named Cooking Advice. I'm going to provide it with a tool with access to a data store filled with 70 classic cookbooks I downloaded from the Gutenberg project. I'd like your help creating the playbook and tool. To start, could you please define a goal for my playbook, right? I find that it's kind of interesting if you use Gemini to make information like goals for itself. I don't know. It tends to work pretty well, right? Maybe I'm talking to Gemini about something that Gemini is going to be doing in the background. Okay. So when I did that, you can kind of say, you know, it came out with this goal right here. This goal right here, notice, is help users with cooking related questions. So what's the goal of this playbook? What does this playbook hope to accomplish? If you've ever done user stories, you kind of understand what I mean. A user story, what's the main goal? What's this user story hope to accomplish? Well, this one's going to help users with cooking related questions by providing advice, recipes, and culinary knowledge from classic cookbooks. Answer questions about ingredients, cooking techniques, recipe recommendations, menu planning, and food prep tips. Guide users through finding specific recipes, understanding historical cooking methods, or adapting classic recipes for modern kitchens. Provide helpful, practical. Okay, so this is my goal. I've just hired my new person. I brought them in here to answer cooking questions, and I said, here's the overview of what you're going to be doing, okay, or at least one of the major tasks that you're going to be doing. So I put a goal in there. Okay, let me save that. When agents need to interact with the outside world, they use tools to do it, right? I wrote an agent for a bank where it needed to look up the user's account. You're asking a question. I'm having a problem with my account. Well, the agent has to look up the account, right? So if I wanted an agent to look up an account, what I could do is I could provide it a tool that would do that. Tools, just like for people, right? Tools, just like for people, are there to help our people do certain things. Uh-oh. Hang on a second. I may have created a problem for myself. Give me 1 second. I'm not sure how I've done it, but somehow I've blown up my. Give me 1 second. Yeah, look at this. It's saying there's no connected app. So somehow my cookbooks have been disconnected from their AI application. I may have named it the same thing, maybe. I don't know. That's interesting. So I'm not sure, but it's not showing me my tool. That's unfortunate. Okay, well, we'll build a new tool, but the problem is I'm not sure it'll have time to go through it to show us all of our information. Anyway, okay, that's unfortunate. So, love working with new technology. You know what they say about live demos? Don't do live demos. Yes. Anyway, so I have a goal for my agent. The next thing I need to do is if my tool needs to access external information, I give it a tool to do it, right? If my playbook needs to access external information, I give it a tool to do it. And as I said, tools basically provide access to the outside world. So I'm going to save my conversational agent so far. And let me come over here to my tools. For whatever reason, it's not seeing my tool, but that's okay. So I can add a new tool. And again, when I'm adding a new tool, think of it as a way to access external information. I can make open API calls. I can call a function. I can connect to some external piece. Connectors API has not been. The connectors, you remember I talked about agent space and how Google now has like 300 connectors or something. Those are connectors. So connectors are designed to connect us to well-known application types. Or of course, I can connect to a data store, a source of truth. Okay. If I'm going to connect to a data store, I got to give it that source of truth. So I'm going to create a data store. You remember when I said some types of AI applications only support some types of data stores? Notice my big list only has 2 choices in it now. Yeah, so this kind of conversational agent, which is brand new, it only supports 2 of the data stores so far. So I'm going to tell it, yes, I want you to go read some PDFs for me. Okay, that's what I want you to do. There's a bunch of PDFs out there. How many? Notice unstructured documents, PDFs, web pages, FAQ files, Word documents, PowerPoints. Yeah, it's a bunch of PDF files. That's what I want it to do. I'm going to do this as a one-time import. I'm not going to have it do it on a schedule. Notice the new streaming option. Every time a new file shows up, it would ingest it, right? So I can give it a path to what I want it to read. Okay. I can give it a path to what I want it to read. Here's my cookbooks out there. I want you to go out there and read this cookbook folder. Okay, yep, valid folder. Okay, what do I want to call this data store name? Cookbook data. Let me give it an ID. Okay, correct. Okay, so what it's going to do is it's going to go out there and index that information. Now let's see. Okay. I'm not sure why it's not showing up. We may have a challenge here today. So what it should do is it should show my data store that I just created, right, in my list here. Give me 1 minute. I'm going to blow that project away and create another project. So this is a new environment. I'm going to see if my problems persist or if they'll go away in a new environment. So I've built a new environment where it's a brand new environment with a temporary user. This is the same kind of environment you get if you use Skill Boost, if you've ever taken classes or done anything in Skill Boost. Okay. So let me go over here to Vertex AI. Let me turn on my Vertex AI stuff. Let me turn on Dialogflow. Let me turn on Dialogflow. Let me go over to AI applications. Let me build a new app again. Failed to load. It's probably a API not active yet. So give me 1 second here. Let me create a new application. It's going to be the conversational agent. Build my own cooking advice. Okay. Let me put it in US Central. Oh, I bet I know what the problem is. Let me put it in US Central. Let me get my tool building and then we'll come back. So this is cooking advice. Okay, let me save this. Let me go build my tool. I bet I know what was wrong. Cooking advice. Cookbooks. Old cookbooks. It's a data store. I bet the problem, Google just made a change in how your data stores work. And since my application is built in the United States, I need my data to be in the United States as well. So this may be what the problem was. Yeah, you see the location global? That was probably the problem. The location has to be, if my application's in the US, the data store has to be in the US. This did not used to need to be true, but they changed it about 3 weeks ago. So this is old cookbooks. Okay. You can also change the parser if you want. It's using the digital parser, which is fine. I really should use the layout parser though. The layout parser is slower, but the layout parser will preserve things like bulleted lists and tables and whatnot. You can imagine a recipe in a cookbook where it's giving like a numeric list or something. The layout parser does a better job with that, but the layout parser is slower. So I'm not going to do the layout parser in this example. So I put it in US. Let me create it and get it reading those documents. Hopefully it'll at least get to some documents here before the end. Let me refresh this. Now it shows up. Yeah. So I have my tool here. Okay, now, when you have a tool like this, one of the confusing things to me about tools was, how does my generative agent know when to use the tool? Because once again, I'm thinking like a developer. If this is true, then use that tool. No. The way generative agents know how to use tools is based on their name and their descriptions, right? I've got a tool named Old Cookbooks. It's going to assume something about the name. But then what you do is you give your tool a description. Same kind of story. What I did is I went out here and, perfect. Now let's create the classic cookbook data store tool. Could you please create a description for the tool? Remember, this is the description the agent will use when trying to understand when using this tool makes sense. So when you're using tools or when you're giving tools to agents, it's totally up to the tool description to kind of tell the agent when to use this tool. Now, you can also use code if you want to, but generally I don't want to do that. The nice thing about generative agents is I let them make their own decisions. If I give an agent a collection of tools, I kind of describe each tool, and the agent can use the description to know when should it use this tool versus that tool, right? That's kind of the idea. So here's my tool description. Search through a collection of 70 classic cookbooks from the Gutenberg project to find recipes, cooking techniques, ingredient information, and culinary advice. Use this tool when users ask for specific recipes, historical cooking methods, traditional dishes, blah, 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 right? So once again, I went to Gemini to get it to help me come up with a suggestion. And it's usually pretty good. Now, you can configure things like which version of Gemini is it using when it uses this tool. You can also configure things like, how does the prompt get constructed when it's looking for the cookbooks, right? So when it's looking through these cookbooks, how does it put that prompt together to know how to search the cookbooks, right? So a tool, as we said, allows us to get information from the outside world. That's kind of what it's good at, right? Okay, so let me go ahead and save my tool. Let me go back over here to my playbooks. Here's my cooking advice playbook. We gave it that goal earlier. Where's my goal? Here's my goal. What's the goal of this? Well, it's going to offer cooking advice. That's what it's going to do, right? Now, once you have tools, you'll notice your tools show up down here at the bottom, okay? So I have that tools, that old cookbook tool. Now what I have to do is I have to tell this playbook what its steps are. A playbook is, you know, I'm playing some sort of sports, and the playbook says, you know, here's a particular attack, or here's a plan that we're going to execute as a sporting team, right? That's our playbook. So in this case, the playbook is, what is this agent going to do? How should it interact with the user? Okay. I can have conditional actions. I can define actions with Python. This is something they just rolled out. Okay. In general, however, once again, like a human, how do I tell the human what the playbook is going to be? Well, once again, I came over here and I went to my, environment here. Great. Now I need you to help me create the instructions for my agent. The instructions should be descriptive using a markdown ordered list. Do you see the example here? Dash, greet the user. Ask them how you can help them today. Dash, summarize the user's request. Ask him. So you see how we're kind of giving it a series of steps. When needed, you can reference the classic cookbook data store using the syntax. That's not quite right. What's our classic cookbook now called? It's called Old Cookbook, right? Old Cookbook. So let me change this to like Old Cookbook. Okay, so it comes up with my steps. Let me grab my steps out of here. Okay. So greet the user warmly and ask how you can help them with their cooking today, right? Listen carefully to the user's cooking related question or request. If the user asks about recipes, cooking techniques, ingredients, or culinary advice that would benefit from classic cooking knowledge, use, okay, now, do you see the syntax? It's $, curly brace. And then you notice I could send the user to a different playbook. Remember what we said, a playbook's kind of like a use case. Can't you imagine one playbook sitting up at the top that says, you know, hey, how can I help you with sales today? And the user says, I'm trying to figure out whether I should buy this or that. And then what happens is the first playbook transfers the user to another playbook that knows how to handle kind of the shopping process. Once you're done with the shopping process, when it's time to check out, maybe I send you to a different playbook that knows how to handle checking out. So remember, the agent can be subdivided into major tasks. The major tasks are playbooks, okay? So I can say, reference the playbook, and you see it'll prompt me, which playbook do you want to use? Oh, cooking advice, okay? If the user asks about recipes, cooking techniques, ingredients, go to the tool and get them information. When searching the data store, use specific keywords related, so I'm kind of giving it advice. Present the information from the cookbooks in a clear, organized manner. For recipes, provide the full recipe, including ingredients and instructions. That's really important. Sometimes if you don't tell it to do that, it'll give you a recipe like a paragraph. This is also where using that slower document parser would do a better job because it preserves layout. So when you're asking for recipes, you want it to present it in the kind of recipe standard format, shall we say, right? If the cookbook information uses outdated measurements or terms, some of these cookbooks are hundreds of years old. So they might reference units of measure that you don't normally use today when cooking, right? So it tells us, we go ahead and tell it to do that. If the user's query cannot be answered using the cookbook collection, acknowledge this and offer alternative suggestions or general cooking advice based on common culinary knowledge, right? Always cite which cookbook the information comes from. I don't need that. I don't care about it citing the cookbook. I could include that, but again, that's probably more related to search, but I guess you could use it with chat too. Ask the user if they need any clarification, encourage the user to experiment with classic recipes and techniques, close the conversation by inviting the user to return anytime they need. Yeah, so I'm kind of telling it, this is your steps. This is what I want you to be able to do. Okay, now let me save that. Let me go over here to let's see. In real life, you should always provide examples, always. I think in the documentation, they say 1 to 4 examples is ideal. I'm not going to give any. Don't have enough time, right? But in real life, you should always provide examples. Okay, so I have my cooking advice. Yes. let me look at some of my settings here. Give me 1 second here. Generative AI. Now, funny story about this example. The first time I ever did this example, it used to be that dangerous content was blocked some. And I noticed that Gemini was blocking a lot of my cooking advice, because apparently in cooking, there's hitting and slicing and cutting and knives, and Gemini didn't like that. It thought it was violence. So Gemini was blocking some of the answers. So luckily, this is already set to block view. That's good, right? Yeah. This is all pretty good. There's one thing I want it to let me do, though. I want to change. Now, we're using Gemini 1. Let me switch this to Gemini 2. And also, let me up these. Okay, do you see where it says selected input tokens and selected output tokens? Remember, a token's about a word. Okay, when I do this example, I run into this a lot, where it will return more content than I'm allowed. Okay, so 8,000 tokens is a pretty good amount of data, right? You figure maybe 300 tokens a page. Okay, so at 8,000 tokens, that's pages of information. Yeah, but this is cooking. In cooking, I can imagine to need to use lots of pages. So remember, this is where you search your data sets. And it says, oh, you want cooking advice. Here's some pages to look at in this book. Here's some pages to look at this book. Here's some pages to look at in this book, right? So I can raise the amount of data that can be used in the answer, pulling from the data source. But also remember, in the grand scheme of things, the more tokens you have in the question, this would be tokens going into the question, and the more tokens you can return in the answer, the bigger your bill will be, right? So do remember that if I raise my token limits like that, it's going to be good for this example, but it's going to be more expensive questions. Because remember, what this one's going to be used for is Gemini. The user is asking this question. Here's all this reference information to use when answering this question. All that basically goes into the question to Gemini. And then I'm saying, okay, Gemini, and you can return, a multi-page answer as your results. Does that make sense? Some chatbots, yes. Mine here, yes. Sometimes the answer would be no. Okay, so I have to raise those for this particular example. But if I were doing tech support, would I need them that high in tech support? We can think about that. Okay. Let me save those settings. Now, let me go over and look at my data stores. Here's my old cookbook data store. What's it saying? It knows there's 70 cookbooks. Yeah, okay, so you see, it's probably not done yet. It's probably not done yet, but you see the green check marks? Yeah, so it's mostly done. So it's gotten a bunch of the cookbooks, but it hasn't quite read them all. Yes, that's because I'm using the fast parser. And again, with the fast parser, it would probably take 10 to 15 minutes for it to go through. So hopefully I've talked 10 to 15 minutes. So let me go to my conversational agent. So I have my conversational agent, right? My agent has a single playbook, which is you offer cooking advice. The cooking advice has a goal. It's going to help people with cooking questions. It has a playbook, which kind of tells them this is the order of operations, if you will. This is the way I want you to help. I imagine hiring the new person. Okay, every time you take a phone call, new person, this is the way I want you to handle this phone call, right? And I list out the items. This is one of the entire components in agent-built applications, is you're not coding every branch with an if statement. You are describing to the agent, which is like a reasoning engine, what you want it to do. You're giving the agent tools it can use to interact with the outside world. Go look up the user's account. Go look up, sales information. Go look up whatever. In this case, go look up cooking data, right? Okay. Now, once my agent's all been set up and once I have it all saved, I can come over here and I can toggle on my simulator. Which environment am I in? Okay. An environment is basically a deployment environment. Conversational agents here, this is, if any of you have ever worked with Dialogflow, you'll recognize this is the old Dialogflow interface. In real life, a lot of times you'll take Dialogflow, conversational agents, and you'll link it to a Git repo. So all of the stuff I've done here, I can put in a Git repo and I can version it. Okay, I can version it. Then what I can do is I can configure what they call environments. That would be basically, where am I deploying into, right? The environments also then have an API you can use. So when you're ready to actually put the chatbot on your web page, you can tie it to an environment, and it will show you the code that you put on the web page to add the chatbot, right? So I would publish this to an environment, a production environment, if you will. And then it's kind of got a webhook. It's got a couple other things. And then you can actually build the chatbot and put it on the website. This is just a quick test utility. So I've got a quick test utility. I'm running it in my only existing environment, which is my draft environment. I'm checking my cooking advice. That's basically the playbook. I'm going to use Gemini Flash as my main model here. Okay, and now I can start interacting with it. Hello. Hello. I'm here to help you with your cooking needs today. Do you have any questions about recipes, cooking, or techniques? Do you see? Greet the user warmly. Do you see it basically did that? What can you tell me about making sandwiches? What can you tell me about making sandwiches? Sandwiches are a great and versatile meal. I can help you with sandwich making advice to give you the best guidance. Could you tell me what specifically you'd like to know, right? Classic sandwich, BLT, grilled cheese, you know. Do you have a good BLT recipe? Okay. I couldn't find a specific BLT. Nice. Do you have a recipe for meatloaf? Now, do you see, I ask it a question. Do you have a recipe for meatloaf? Do you see this little pop-up right here? This is showing you when it's interacting with the tool, right? If I expand that, do you see this is what it searched for, meatloaf recipe? And do you see here, this would be any responses that came back, right? Are there any meatloaf recipes that it found? And you see right here, it's saying, well, yeah, we've got this cookbook out here, right here. This is one of those old cookbooks. This is one of those old cookbooks, right? And in this cookbook, yeah, look right there. Do you see in this cookbook on page 174, in this cookbook on page 174, there's a meatloaf recipe. Do you see, since I used the fast parser? So this is a 600-page cookbook, right? Do you see, since I used the fast parser, I don't see, I can't imagine the cookbook was this boring, right? Imagine the actual cookbook had some information in there that was maybe a little bit more formatting or something. This particular parser doesn't really pull that out. Actually, that was the cookbook, so I guess it wasn't that boring. Okay. Still, so you can see, what did the tool return? Do you see in here, like, you know, it's showing me some latency. How long did it take it to do that, right? And then it comes back and it gives me my response, right? So you see, then it came back and it gave me my response. Okay, I found a meatloaf recipe with vintage cookbooks. And so it gives me sort of the recipe right there. Okay. How long did this take? My whole demo blew up halfway through and I had to rebuild it all from scratch. It didn't take long, right? So what's really cool about these AI applications in Google Cloud is how easily it allows us to build search engines for our website, chatbots for a website. Tell me about William Faulkner. Tell me about William Faulkner, writer that grew up not too far. I'm designed to help with cooking-related questions. Therefore, I cannot provide information about William Faulkner. Yes, I'm doing a better job of helping my chatbot do what it's supposed to do. I have lowered the possibility of hallucinations because I've told it, when you're answering questions, pull them out of this source of truth, right? So I focused my generative application. I've built an agent that knows how to basically answer cooking related questions. But could you imagine it do sales related questions? Or here's a bunch of PDFs on tech support. Now we can build tech support for our web application, right? So they really do a good job of making it simple for us to build an agent that we can build on a website or anywhere else, right? And again, this is one type of agent. Okay, a couple last things here. First off, I have a whole bunch of links on Google Cloud. You can find my links on Google Cloud if you go to this website right here. You see gcp.help. If you go to gcp.help, it'll take you to this page. It's just a Google Doc. That QR code will also take you to this page. This is a big Google Doc that has nothing but links on different topics in Google Cloud. If you go find my Google Doc, I have a subsection in my Google document with links on AI applications. If you'd like more information on building AI applications, I have some links in there where they'll talk about building AI applications, right? Along with a bunch of other links on Google Cloud. Also in my links file, if you want to get a hold of me after this event, there's my contact details. You're welcome to shoot me an email, ask me a question. I'm happy to point you in the right direction. Good deal. Excellent. I don't know. Can people ask questions? I don't know if you can ask questions in this environment.
So let me check if you have question in the comments, or if you don't have, so I can also ask a question for myself.
All right.
Do you check? Can you check if you have question?
No.
Okay. So I have question for myself. So
go ahead.
So for example, if you have a enterprise who want to make the same application for your customer or for another use case, so do you give the advice like use this so use conventional AI, or use build your own with long chain, or write your own code?
Well,
what you will give?
It's a classic build it versus buy it argument, right? This is a buy it argument. We are paying Google to build this application for us. Google is handling the ranking, and let's face it, Google knows a thing or two about ranking, right? Google is ranking the results. Google is selecting how the input documents have been parsed and chunked. So, the short answer is this is a quick and easy way to do it, and it's going to give you results that are probably really good. Okay. If you wanted to build a chatbot, I don't see a downside of trying this. The worst case, it doesn't work as well as you hope it would. If it doesn't work as well as you hoped it would, and you want to be more involved, you certainly can use LangChain. You can use, LangGraph. You can put your agent together that way, or maybe you can use the new agent development kit. The new agent development kit is really kind of neat. So you could also look at the new agent development kit as an alternative to the kind of doing it this way. But just because you can build it yourself, it doesn't mean it's going to be better than what Google can build with this wizard, right? So I think the bigger question would be, why is it that this approach is not going to work for you, right? Valid arguments to me would be, this is more expensive per month than if I build it myself. Oh, okay, that might be true, right? This might not meet your cost point. And if you build it yourself, you might be able to build it less expensively, right? So that might be an argument, okay? Another argument would be, there's something special about the way I'm going to parse or store or search my RAG data source, right? So if you want to be more involved with, for example, how RAG works, RAG is kind of an umbrella topic, but there's all kinds of like sub variations on how exactly you do RAG. So my answer to you is, if it meets your cost point, this wizard is probably going to do a great job, okay? And you should just build it with a wizard and go about your way happy. But if it either doesn't do a great job, or the cost doesn't work, or there's something specialized you need to do. Most chatbots do not need to do anything special. They need to index documents, be able to search documents, be able to, retrieve and generate results. Most RAG implementations are nothing sophisticated. So building it yourself, you have more control, but I'm not sure, unless you really know what you're doing, that you're going to be anywhere near as good as this is going to be, right? So that's kind of the big thing. What's your argument? Why are you going to build it yourself? I know we're all developers. Look, I'm a developer. Developers like to write code, right? That's kind of why we're developers. But in this case, I'm gonna let the tool write the code, and I can just integrate it in my application. And I get really good results without me having to do a lot of manual work. RAG engine helps if you're doing it yourself. RAG engine can help a lot. That new agent development kit can probably help you, but the agent development kit is very young. LangChain, LangGraph are much more mature. So I guess that would be my argument is what's your motivation? Why do you think building it yourself is going to be better? And if you can give me a good answer, then let's go. Otherwise, this is awfully nice.
Okay, so I asked this question because now you have many tools you can use to build the agent. So you have also now the new solution of Google, so Agent Space who come, and so sometimes you can, when you want to build your solution, so you just have many possibility, and you are there and you check what is the tool I will use to build my agent. So if I build if I write the code, or if I use the solution like conventional agent to build my agent, and so this I think so this real so this thing is very important because the choice of tool you use to build your solution so can impact your project for a long time. So for example, if you use a conventional agent and okay, you start to build, and sometimes after you progress and you have some use case and you see so it's not easy for you to implement this use case with conventional agent to continue to give you opportunity to your customer to continue to use your agent. So we start now to move to another solution, or you check what do you do. So I think it's important before to start. So what is solution you can use, and if after you have some challenge or some new thing you want to implement, it will be easy for you to implement this.
Yeah, you brought up a really good point too, which is most organizations I work with are multi-cloud, right? And so if I build it with LangChain, LangGraph, or even the agent development kit, if suddenly the winds change and they don't want to run this in Google anymore, they want to run this in Azure, or they want to run this in AWS, LangChain, LangGraph, agent development kit, those are all technologies that are cloud agnostic, right? We may have to replace our vector database. We may have to replace, how we do vector search or how we serve the application. But that is one thing about the LangChain, LangGraph, agent development kit approach is it would be easier to build it so it's not specifically tied to Google Cloud, right? This is definitely a Google Cloud out-of-the-box solution, and it's built on top of all these other Google Cloud technologies. So if you want to leave the door open to make it easier for the possibility that 6 months from now our agents need to be running on OpenAI, or our agents need to be running on Claude or whatever else, then Anthropic, we could do that easier with LangChain, LangGraph, agent development kit than what we saw here. So this is also a specifically completely Google Cloud solution. Yeah.
Okay. So is your yes?
I have a question. Okay. How do you see the evolution of intelligent agents in the coming years?
So, I told you 2 years ago, I could hardly spell generative AI, and now I'm using it all the time, right? I think, it's going to drastically change a lot of different things, right? I think it's going to change the way people do their jobs. I use generative AI daily, right? Not always agents, but I use generative AI daily. I, probably are more likely to search with generative AI these days than I am on Google search, right? In my spare time right now, I'm writing a book for O'Reilly on, this professional cloud architect certification. When I'm writing that book, I'm using I'm using, generative AI to help me do research, to help me compose paragraphs, to help reword paragraphs, So I think agents are going to change the way a lot of us do our jobs because we're going to have AI assistants, and our AI assistants right now may be something basic like Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini, but moving to the future, our AI assistants will be things like this agent space, where I will have an agent that has access to my email, and it has access to my calendar, and it has access to my Google Drive, and I can go to my agent and say, hey, I'm thinking about taking next Friday off. Do you think I could take next Friday off? And my agent will be able to look at all this stuff and say, no, you're already working. You're giving a presentation next Friday. You can't take it off. So I think your agents are going to become much more connected and personalized. Again, kind of the beginning of my story where I talked about general Gemini versus, say, an agent. Same thing here, right? Right now, a lot of us, we're going out there to Gemini and we're searching things in Gemini. But fairly soon, I think we'll have more in the way of agents built in. Did you see the leak on iPhones, right? iPhones, right now, your iPhone, Hey Siri, can connect to ChatGPT. But I think in like the next generation of the iOS, you're going to be able to switch that to Gemini. Well, systems like Hey Siri or Hey Alexa or anything else, all of them are going to become, have a more agentic sort of approach in handling things. Also, if I use the analogy of this is a personal assistant, right? If you were some rich person and you had a personal assistant, maybe you send the personal assistant out to do things for you, right? Well, why can't we have agents do the same thing? Hey, I need to get a new pair of tennis shoes for CrossFit. Could you research and find me the best recommended pair of CrossFit tennis shoes and order them for me, right? And so the agent goes out there and the agent can interact with web pages. Google just released that new agent-to-agent protocol, right? How about agents in my phone talk to agents at other websites? And it's not me, the human, shopping the website. It's the agent that's shopping the website. So I think we're going to see an explosion of agent-to-agent kind of applications. I was talking to a security friend of mine, and he says that they already have had to change the way they look at some security on the website. Because when an agent comes into the website, the agent's like blowing through the pages really fast, like a human would not do. And their security systems used to block that. But they've discovered that a lot of that is now agents that are coming in to go through the website, right? So they're having to change their security settings to allow the agents to come through the website and interact with it. Because again, it might be an automated agent shopping on the website rather than a human. And how fast the agent can go through is much faster. So I think we're going to see agents that we can give tasks to when they go out and do things for us. I definitely think you're going to see more of that.
Okay. So, oui, c'est bon pour toi?
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
So I have last question for you. So this question is for the member of our community. So now also we have many tools on the market to build different things about AI solution. And so if you have advice you can give to the young person on the community who want to start a career in AI. So what is advice you will give to these guys to help these guys so don't move to start to learn Google AI technologies and move to Amazon or move to Azure, and because you have many tools, so you don't know what is the place you will start and what do you can start to learn now, and tomorrow you will have a new solution who come on the market, and you will say, okay, do you move to learn or do you not move or continue to study the solution I study now? And so what is advice you will give to new young come to this market who want to start your career in AI?
Well, things change a lot, right? I was thrown out of university the first time I went. So I was in the military. I worked as an auto mechanic, a diesel mechanic for a couple of years, so I did a lot of stuff before I got into IT. I think the thing with IT is you have to be willing to learn, and your learning can never stop. I'm 57 now, and I spend my days learning high tech so I can teach it to other people, so I work, Google hires me to teach classes on Google Cloud. I travel around, I do virtual events, all I do pretty much is teach about Google Cloud. And, in order to do that, I have to I have to learn new stuff all the time. So I think you definitely have to be willing to learn. AI is a great technology to be in. Cloud is a great technology to be in. The number one paying job in the United States coming out of university is, software engineer, computer engineer. There's a bunch of chemical engineer. There's other things too, but there's a lot of top paying jobs you can get in the US and anywhere in the world, really, if you can build systems, if you know cloud. I am mostly focused. I've done some AWS, I've done some Azure, but I mostly am focused on Google Cloud. But again, if my boss came to me and said, we really need you to learn this new technology, can you do it? My boss just did this, right? 6 months ago, my boss came to me and said, hey, we need some people that can teach Databricks. Would you be willing to learn Databricks? So yeah, it took me a couple of months to become a Databricks certified instructor, but I learned a new technology because, I was willing to do that. It took time, it took effort, it took time when I wasn't working, personal time. But I think if you're willing to learn technologies, cloud is a fantastic area to be in. Most big organizations are trying to move to the cloud. In the US, you have a decent number of organizations that have moved. You still have a lot of organizations that are moving. Obviously, parts in Africa, you have a lot of moving to move. There's a lot of organizations that are not cloud at all. So do you look at helping organizations move to cloud? There's tons of jobs in the UK and Canada. If you are willing to move and if you can show a skill like AI or show a skill like cloud, I think those are definitely skills that organizations are looking for, right? You have certifications in Google Cloud on machine learning. You have certifications in Google Cloud on cloud architecture. Certifications are something that you can learn to study for and take, and that looks fantastic on a resume if you're trying to get in the door. There's lots of open source organizations. You can donate time to open source organizations, so you can show experience through open source organizations. I think showing that you're willing to learn, showing that you have an up-to-date knowledge base, showing that you have experience doing anything, those are all things that organizations look for, right? I never finished. When I went back to university the second time, I never finished because I got hired out of school to go write software, basically. So when I was in my last year of university, I was hired away to go write software. Yes, if you can show skills, that's something that is definitely of interest. And if you can show that you're willing to continue to learn, and if you say yes, your boss comes to you and says some crazy thing. How do you think I ended up teaching? I worked for 3 months in Lagos, Nigeria one time. My boss came to me and said, we're looking for someone to go to Lagos. Would you go do that? Sure, I'll go to Lagos. Why not? Went and worked for Zenith Bank in Lagos for a few months. Your boss will like it if you are willing to do extra things. There's a lot of stuff, but I think never stopping learning, always continuing to learn new stuff, being willing to learn new stuff. I think that's probably the most important skill you can get, especially in IT, especially in AI. It's moving very fast right now, right? AI is exploding all over the place, and organizations are hungry and they have no idea what it means. Used to be the people talked about AI were the geeks like me in the basement. Now the people talking about AI are like the CEO at the top of the building. And they're saying, we need this AI stuff. And they don't know what that means. They don't know how to use it. They think it's all generative AI. Probably 90% of AI applications or 95% of AI applications are not generative AI. They're more traditional AI, machine learning kind of apps. But how about just good data analytics? How about good software design? I think there's a lot of IT related opportunities out there in the world. AI is a very hot area right now, right? Generative AI is a very hot area right now. But still, I think that builds on solid software design. It builds on solid data analytics. It builds on solid cloud skills. So I think there's a lot of stuff you can do that doesn't necessarily have to be AI. But if you have the AI as well, that's always nice. Yeah.
Okay, so if I summarize, so is you need to have good base in IT, cloud computing, and after that you need to like to learn.
Yes.
And you keep learning.
That's it. You can't ever stop. When I got into IT, I was a Perl developer. Okay, Perl, I don't know. Does anyone write Perl anymore? Not much, you know. So when I got into IT, I was a Perl developer, then I was a Java developer, you know, then I was a JavaScript developer, and then, you know, it's like over time, even in IT, you know, this was obviously way before cloud. So you, even if you stay in IT, you will keep learning. Yes.
Yes. So I think so. The member of community hear you very well. So keep learning. So yes,
That's it.
it's very important. So thank you so much for your time. So so I think so we will share this with the all people, the people in community, because I think people are not the all participant is not there now, and I think people come after to watch the video, and so we will
Sure.
share this with the member of community. So thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
And so I hope we will see you again for another event in GDG Cloud Abidjan community.
Absolutely. You guys take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
My pleasure.